Hello my Quilty friends, today I've got a very special video for you. I'm going to show you how to make this super quick and easy baby quilt that features a beautiful heart in the middle, and the reason why it's so special is because I'm making mine to donate to Comfort Cases, which is a nationwide charity that makes up cases to send to children that are in foster care, and I would be thrilled if you would join me. I'm going to put a link down below with all the details. We make our quilts in April and we send them in May, and we have a whole heap of prizes you can win as well. So make sure you check that out. But in the meantime, press your fabric and then let's make this cute baby quilt. To make this quilt, you'll need 3 different fabrics, and I'm using this super cute dog collection fabric called Dog Park by Sarah Watts that was kindly donated by Ruby Star Society for our quilt donation drive. To make the heart baby quilt, you can find the fabric requirements and the cutting instructions over on my website. Plus, I've made a PDF that's free over on my website that you can print out and use as a reference when you're making this quilt. I'll put the link down in the description below for you. So we're going to start off by making the heart, and I've got my B fabric here, or the fabric that's going to be the background of the heart, and I've got my 4 3x3" squares and my 2 8¼ by 8¼ squares here, and all we're going to do is turn them over to the back and on the wrong side draw a diagonal line from corner to corner, and we'll do that for all 6 pieces. And I'm just using a washable marker. We will be stitching right on the line, so it is preferable to use something that will be washed out eventually. So for example, don't just use a regular pencil, I don't think, for this project. So I like to start at the top here, line up my ruler, check that it's lined up properly at the bottom, and then come back to the top and check it, and then draw my line. So the next step is to take our 2 pieces of fabric that we've cut for our heart, and they measure 16 inches by 8¼ inches. Now we want the 16 inches to be the length of it because that ultimately is the shape of the heart. So if you're using directional fabric, you'll notice in my notes you'll need to buy ½ yard for this. Or if you're not using directional fabric, you can get away with just using 1/4 yard. But I wanted to use this super cute little dog print, so that's what I've done for this. So you'll notice I've got both pieces right next to each other, and that's how I want to sew them together. So that's how we're going to start, and this is what I recommend because you can accidentally sew them in the wrong order. Don't ask me how I know that. Well, the truth is I made a big boo-boo, and when I do make big boo-boos, I'm really happy because then I can tell you what not to do. So I'm going to take one of my larger squares and place it on the bottom, right on the bottom here, so it's lined up on this edge and on this edge. And then I've got my diagonal line coming across this way. So it's starting in the bottom right hand corner and then coming up to the top. And I've got my fabrics right sides together, and then if I just turn this down and pretend I'm folding it on the line, you can see there that it's going to make that heart shape along the bottom. So then I know that's correct. So I'm just going to make sure all those edges are lined up nicely and then pop a few pins in. And what we're going to be doing is sewing along this line here. So I'm just going to pop them next to the line so that they're not going to get in the way of my sewing, but it is just going to hold it in place for me. And now we'll take our second one, but we don't want to place it like that, which is what I did. We want to turn that around. So then it's still right sides together, but if I fold this top corner down, you can see I'm getting that heart shape on the bottom now. So I've got it going on this side and on this side. And then I'm lining up all those edges and popping in a couple of pins. And then what we're going to do is take the little squares and pop them on the top. And we want to do the same thing. We want to line them up on both edges. And then when we sew along this line, we want it to be creating that new shape. So that's perfect, just like that. So the only other way you could do it would be like that, but that would be wrong because we wouldn't want to just sew the line along there. It wouldn't achieve anything. So we're just going to pop it on the corner like that. And I will pop some pins in, remembering to make sure the edges are lined up nicely. And then again on this corner, and it is right sides together. Popping a pin in. Oop. When you're popping pins in, you do want to make sure you're going through both layers of fabric. And then I'll repeat that for these two corners. So now what we're going to do is sew along all our drawn lines, and if you just take a moment to look, you can see I've got my heart shape there all ready to go. So just check that you are creating that heart shape with the way you've pinned your pieces on, and then let's get to sewing. So I'm stitching at stitch length 2. I'm using Wonderful Confetti Thread, who are also sponsoring my quilt donation drive. Thank you, Wonderful. And we're starting at the very edge there and just going to sew along that line, and just take your time. It's better to be accurate and take your time than rushing, and if the pins get in your way, just remove them. And then I'm just going to come right off the very edge, cut my thread, and I will just take those pins out so I don't accidentally stab myself with them. And then I'll just find my next drawn line, and I'll repeat this until I've sewn along all my drawn lines, which was 6 in total. And something I've never tried is actually a friction pen. I've heard they work a treat with projects like this. I'd love to give one a go. Let me know in the comments if you've used a friction pen for your sewing and if you recommend them. And also don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell. It means you'll never miss out on another video, and it means the world to me. Thank you so much. So for each of our pieces, we're just going to cut off the excess now, and what I like to do is just lift it up and check that it is going to create that new corner for me, because stranger things have happened to me, and so I do just like to double check that. So once I know I'll be cutting it here, I just take my ruler, line up a 1/4 inch line on top of my stitches and trim. And we can check again, and that looks great. And then I'll do the same on this side. Works, trim. And then on this big corner, and we definitely don't want to get that wrong. So just checking. And some of you will be thinking, how could you get that wrong? Trust me, I could. So I just like to have a few measures in place to make sure I'm not making big boo-boos. So I'm just turning that so I can get a better angle, lining up that 1/4 inch mark on right on top of my stitches and trimming. And you'll see now I'm getting my shape. I'll repeat that for the other piece. And then we're going to press. Now we're going to press, so I'm just going to set the stitches, which just sets the stitches into the fabric, making the stitches stronger and helping our block or our quilt top lay flatter. So just giving all the stitches a quick press. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press them towards the piece that I sewed on. I'm going to finger press in here, making sure there's no creases, and pressing. And doing that for all the pieces that I sewed. So I'm just giving the whole pieces a little once over, which I like to do. And now what we're going to do is just sew these two pieces together. So I am just going to pin it because I've got a few seams that I want to make sure are lined up nicely, particularly these two here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to guess about 1/4 inch down. You could measure it if you want, and I'm going to pop a pin through both layers, trying to hit exactly where the seam starts so that I know that they'll be joined up nicely when I sew them. So I'm just going to make sure they're looking like they're lined up nicely there. Lining up these edges here, guessing approximately where that 1/4 inch sewing line will be, and then opening it up, and that looks pretty good to me. So I'm just going to pop a pin in there. Then we've got the same thing happening down here. So I will just do exactly the same thing. It's a little bit fiddly, but sometimes just doing these little extra things can just help. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I will just make sure these edges are lined up nicely and pop one in there and one at the beginning. Just lining up this edge and this edge. And then let's sew. Sewing with all the same settings, starting off at the very edge and removing my pins as I need to. Okay, let's give it a press. And then you can press the seams either to one side or open. It's just a personal preference. Today I'm going to press open. Is a little bit fiddly. There we go. And then what I'll do is just turn it over and give it a press. Isn't that looking super cute? You can see we've got our heart now. Let's add our borders. So before we add our borders, one thing you can quickly do is just check that it's square and you're getting rid of sort of any little scraggly bits. All I'm going to do is take my ruler and line it up along the edges and just tidy it up a little bit. It just helps with adding the borders on. Just a little bit of excess there. Just going to pop my line right on top of the seam and then line it up. I can see that I've lost a little bit here. Can you see that? I don't know what's happened, but when I attach my border, I'm just going to pretend that I haven't lost that bit, which will actually fix that up. So I will leave that as it is. Carry on and do all four sides, and then let's add our borders. Now what we're going to do is sew our two side pieces on that measured 5 inches by 16 inches, so I'm just going to place them right sides together. Line up all the edges, pin and sew on both sides. Now I can feel that I'm coming up to a seam underneath, and what I'm doing is just making sure that the seams are sitting in the correct position in the direction that we press them when I sew over them, because we want our quilt top to sit nice and flat. So now we're just going to set the stitches and press our seams towards our longer piece that we just attached. And one of the most frequently asked questions I get about comfort cases is, can the quilts that I donate go back to my community? And the reason why I love comfort cases so much is the answer is yes. If it's important to you that the quilts that you donate go back to your community, well, you can just request that. So when you donate your quilts, I do have a PDF form that's critical to fill out, because that's how we're going to be able to keep account of how many quilts we actually get donated. But on that form, you can just write on there that you'd like it to go back to maybe, let's say, your town, your county, or your state. Isn't that incredible? So now all I'm going to do is take my remaining B pieces and sew them onto the bottom and the top, doing exactly the same process we did for the side pieces. And then when I'm pressing again, I'll be pressing them down towards our longer piece. So I've finished sewing the sides and the top pieces, which completes my background. Now we're going to sew on our borders, and we'll start with our sides and then we'll do the top just like we did these ones. The side borders measure 5 inches by 25 inches and the top and the bottom measure 5 inches by 34 inches. So I'm just going to do exactly the same process. I'll sew these two sides on and then I'll sew the top and the bottom, pressing towards the piece we just sewed on. enjoyed this video on how to make this super cute baby quilt. Now if you're wondering how to finish it, my next video will show you how to finish it using the self-binding technique, and that's where we use the backing to bring around to the front to do the binding. It's a way quicker method than doing the traditional way, and if you'd like to check that out, the link is right above here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.